All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? So this is what happens when you're actually doing the business at the same time as you are doing a live production.
We'll get everything taken care of today.
Business getting done live at the moment. We got closings, all that kind of stuff. Welcome to Propelio's.
Alrighty.
What is this? Episode 10 of Grant. Reach me something. If you are reading from the description, where
I was buying a house.
Hey, but that's what I was saying. This is how business actually gets done. We're really actually doing business here, so it's an awesome thing to see some of the behind the scenes on that.
Good morning, everybody.
On this episode of Grant Reach Me Something.
Reach you something.
It says Grant Reach Me Something as our description.
Oh, God. Hey, good morning. I'm Ryan. This is Grant for another episode of Grant Teach Me Something.
You didn't sing it. Come on, man. What's going on?
I just bought a house. Grant Teach Me Something.
All right, there we go.
This is episode 11. We're going to be doing deal analysis in this episode. Before I go with that, I just want to do a mini rant. I was watching Facebook Live last night. There was a Ty Lopez thing, and he does have some good stuff sometimes, and he does have some stuff that's like way salesy. He had this 21-year-old wholesaler who was just killing it. Good for him, making tons of money. But then I was like, hey, where do you get your comps? And he was like, Zillow and Redfin. And I'm like, is he really getting comps from Zillow and Redfin, or is that just what he's teaching? So, obviously we'd love you to use Propelio for comps, but, use real comps. Zillow and Redfin are not real comps. Those aren't real numbers. But that's my 30-second rant.
Well, and it's very applicable though for this, because part of the biggest thing about deal analysis is knowing your numbers. You've got to have accurate numbers, and something like Zillow is, especially if you're in a state like Texas where we're a non-disclosure state, non-something state. I'm blanking on the name. Anyway, where you have to actually have MLS access to know the real numbers of what's going on. Zillow is running an algorithm, and they're guessing at what that number might be. Zillow, right. Trulio, those kinds of things, they are guesses. They are a guess based off of an algorithm, based off of tax appraisals and data that they're not allowed to share out.
And on that, and pulling comps is almost like a subtle art, because it's not like, oh, you go off of a semicircle, you go off this, you go off the neighborhood line. So if I've got a 4-lane road, the house over here is probably different than the house over there.
Yeah, and that's a very important thing to know is, and for those of you who are my students on the comps video, that's a perfect example of, there is, from across the street can be the wrong comp. In the same neighborhood can be the wrong comp, because these might all be
non-disclosure.
Non-disclosure state. Okay, good. So it was non-disclosure state. It could be just right behind them and not be an accurate comp. Too many people think, well, just get your comps within a half a mile, and that's where they're coming wrong with it. And that's, again, Zillow, Trulia, they are wrong. Wrong. Fake numbers. We'll go the Trump route and go with Renee. Fake numbers. You're fake news. So you've got to get good numbers, and again, for those of you who are not agents, who don't have MLS access, CreativeCashFlow.com is the best place for you to get those numbers. You do have real MLS comps, and that is the only thing that you can base your numbers off of, is real MLS comps. Anything else is fake numbers.
Since we're on this rant, do you mind if I do a mini commercial?
I would love for you to do a mini commercial.
Propelio, for the cup of a coffee a day, you may have comps, or access to comps and access to lead lists. I buy this cup of coffee from my local coffee shop for $4.50 every single day, Monday through Friday. If I multiply that, I'm sorry, I can't.
You can't do it. You can't even get through it.
I can't do it. Anyway, cup of coffee a day, you'll have comps. Anyway.
And even speaking as somebody who does have MLS access, lots of times when I've got somebody that's calling me with a lead, I'll input it into Propelio before I'll go into my MLS access, because the user interface is just that much better.
And I will just say that I know I began this whole thing with shitting on Ty Lopez for selling, and here I am selling. My bad. Anyway, what is deal analysis?
So deal analysis, the cornerstone of deal analysis is having the correct numbers on it. And from there, you've got to be able to figure out, is this a deal that's worth you doing or not? And it's really important. It's really important to make sure that you're looking at the right numbers, and not only are you looking at the right comps, but you're looking at the right way to look at that deal, right? Mm-hmm. So the most common, the most understood way of doing this is just saying, hey, I'm going to buy at 75% of the ARV. Mm-hmm. Quick recap: ARV means after repair value. So you buy the house, After you fix it up, it's going to be worth $100,000. It needs $20,000 worth of work in it. If you're willing to buy at 75% of the ARV, you're willing to buy at $55,000.
But Grant, when you say know the numbers, what are the numbers?
Well, I just gave you some. So the ARV, those are your comps, right? When you're comping your property, you've got to know your right ARV. Now, our basic flippers mentality is going to be that 70 to 75% ARV. That's what we want to be, under with our purchases. Our acquisition and our rehab need to add up to be 75% of the ARV.
Right.
Okay. That's pretty easy to understand.
But what are the additional numbers that? Because I know when you're evaluating a property, you've got your quick glance, you've got your quick look, deal or no deal. Okay, it looks kind of a deal. You do a further glance, and then you do because like for me personally, and I'm not claiming I know what I'm doing,
Sure.
but when I see a quick email blast from John Smith, the wholesaler guy, I'm like, nope, okay, cool. This is not a deal, moving on.
Right.
And all I'm doing is the 75% my spares using their numbers.
Right.
If their numbers aren't right, and maybe I'm doing it wrong because I'm too busy, because who's to say they have right numbers?
Right.
That wholesaler might not know that he's got a diamond in the rough. So I'm not saying do what I do, and it's probably a bad habit, and that's why I'm looking to hire somebody to
Just
actually
to
run the numbers.
Yeah.
But you have your quick analysis, you have your quick, for me personally, the quick comps, and like just basically look at the neighborhood.
Right.
Because if somebody's saying it's $1 million house, and I'm looking at going, there ain't even a $600,000 house in the neighborhood, I'm either confused and I'm going to completely research more, or I'm going to be like, this guy's full of crap.
Right.
So
So
anyway, what are those steps for you?
yeah, so those steps, and I'll speak to just that point too. I mean, buying from wholesalers, it's a really good example because you've got deals being thrown at you all the time. And I do the same thing. I'm looking at it, and if you're not, I mean, most wholesalers are shooting them out at 85 cents anyway, just on their numbers, and I'm like, I'm not even going to mess with this. And if their numbers make sense, my next step is to comp the property. And if their comps match my comps, my next step is to go to the house and see if the rehab matches. And I'll tell you something, it doesn't. It never does.
Yeah.
And wholesalers right now are just, they're a dime a dozen, and I've yet to find one that's actually sending out real comps,
And I
real
will
numbers.
acknowledge what I do is a very bad habit. Yeah, I know Grant's like, let me talk. Well, we're going back and forth. I realize I have a very bad habit of just trusting their numbers, and if it doesn't work, moving on. I need to be running comps on everything.
Sure.
But,
And I will speak to, as somebody who has hired somebody to run comps on everything coming through, I wouldn't say that's a prudent waste or a prudent spending of your money. They are wrong. So anyway, what I'm really trying to get at here is the deal analysis side. We've got our easy analysis. We've got this. We want to buy at 75 cents. Okay, that's where we want to be. If you're buying and holding, a lot of you might make that decision to be in the 82, 85 cent range, whatever that is. But these are ideas that we're pretty familiar with, and I think that it's also valuable to know some different ways to analyze deals, some different ways to look at deals, because especially when we're in markets like we're in right now, where you've got some really crazy deals popping in front of you that might be pushing values a little bit, but you need to look at things a little bit differently. That's where something like the owner financing side of things comes into play, or holding it long term for the rental comes into play, that kind of stuff. And you've got to see what your returns are going to be, and do they make sense for you, right?
Right.
So the traditional knowledge of 70 to 75% ARV is there, because that gives you enough space to absorb any kind of issues that may arise. You might, put a hammer in a wall and see you got a bunch of termite damage, and okay, well now you've got an extra however many thousands of dollars that you've got to spend on your termite mitigation. And if you bought at 70 cents, then you've got the room to afford that and still not lose your money. Right now, when the Dallas market in particular is so incredibly competitive, people are buying in those 82, 85s, and that's fine if that runs your numbers. But what I want to talk about today, and deal analysis is a multi-part issue that we're going to talk about several times through these Grant Teach Me Somethings. And as a matter of fact, I want you guys to know that next week, if you tune in, we will live analyze one of your deals for you, okay? So what I want to do is I'm actually going to have you guys comment if you want to get analyzed. We'll call you and we'll do a live analysis of your deal on air so that everybody can see kind of how this gets put into practice.
Actual numbers.
Right, with actual numbers, with an actual deal. And it may not be a deal and you may have a deal. And I'm just going to charge you that whole deal for running the numbers live. No, I'm just playing. So we know the 70, we know the 75. That's easy. But what happens when you start looking at a deal that you might want to take over subject to, or you might want to take over with owner financing? You're going to be looking at a different way of analyzing that deal because it's not going to be at 75 cents. Heck, you might be buying a house at 95 cents on the dollar and still make a ton of money. This is one of those things that I talk about frequently where it's like, hey, I can buy a house all the way up to 100% of its value and still make a bunch of money on it. How do you run those numbers, right? So that's going to be the part that I focus on mostly today. But I do want to point out, we are looking at these things. We are looking at your comments. So if you have some comments out there or some questions out there about the 70 cents or the 75 cents, please shoot them to me. We can get those answered really quickly. I'm going to go into a little bit deeper of the deal analysis and looking at the owner financing side to back in on that side.
And I'd like to point out that Daniel is right. There
He
are
is. Yes, I was
plenty
gonna
of
say that,
wholesalers
say.
out there. Don't send your deals to Grant because Grant hates you. You can send them to me and Daniel.
Yes,
or Daniel and I.
I don't mean to collectively tell all these wholesalers that you're not doing a good job. That's not true. But there is a lot out there that just don't have the right numbers, and they're probably running their numbers off of Zillow instead of Propelio. So let's jump in to what I'm talking about as far as the deal analysis side goes. So when you're looking at a deal that might be low equity, okay? I'm trying to find the camera we're talking, here we go. Those low equity deals are hard to really get a grip on whether or not this is something that you want to move forward with. And what I like to talk about is backing into the deal. What I want you to do is I want you to start from the end and then kind of back out all the numbers, and that's going to let you know whether or not you're making enough money for this deal to matter.
Real quick question. What does Grant Kemp consider low equity?
Yeah, so low equity, that's a good question. Low equity is going to be something where somebody owes enough to where, like for instance, we were just talking about we want to buy at that 75% mark. Ideally, that's where we kind of want to be. Well, if somebody cannot sell you their house at 75% because they owe $70,000 and it needs $20,000 worth of work, right? And that's a $90,000 basis. You're in that property for 90 grand when it would only be worth 100 after all is said and done. That's low equity. That's a deal that a wholesaler's not going to be able to move on because a wholesaler needs to buy at 80 or 80 or below in order to make any kind of money on it. They can't move on that. A fix and flipper can't move on that, and it's just thrown in the trash.
So for you, it's that 75% to 100%?
What I would say low equity would basically be 83, 82% and above.
Okay, so 82%.
That's a good 2.
2%.
Hey, good save.
And above.
Yeah, 82% above. And again, the reason why I'm saying it at that is that if you're a wholesaler, you're able to buy at 80, 82 cents and then probably shoot it out, and somebody will probably buy it at 85. But if they owe 82, there's just no room for you to make money. Now we're in that area where you can't do anything with it, wholesale, fix and flip, whatever that might be.
So wholesalers be sad.
Yes, wholesalers be sad at that number. So what I want you to look at is a couple of different things, and we're going to start with some of the more basic rules of thumb, and then I'm going to dive into some numbers and kind of back some things out and show you what the thought process might look like for this. One basic rule of thumb that I have is that if I'm putting cash into a deal, like when we're in these low equity deals and we're going to run the numbers on it and see if it's worth taking over on a loan or doing something subject to with this low equity deal, one of the things that I want is I want to have at least twice as much cash, whatever cash that I'm putting into the deal, I want to have at least twice that amount in equity once I close on the deal.
Now, is this that whole cash on cash returns that we talked about a couple weeks ago?
Somewhat, but not, well, actually, I'm going to take that back and I'm going to say not really.
Okay.
So let's look at an example number, okay?
Yeah.
And let's make this nice and easy. Let's say that somebody has a house and it doesn't have any repairs that need to get done to it. It's completely just in great shape, doesn't need any repairs. And let's say that they owe $80,000 on the house. So we're looking at taking over on a mortgage of $80,000 subject to. Well, what we might be able to, or what we might have in front of us is they may be $10,000 behind on their payments. And that puts us in a spot where if we're going to take over on $80,000 and we're going to put $10,000 more into it, well, now our total basis is basically $90,000. It's a little bit less because some of that will go towards their arrearages, but we're not going to get into that today. So we're basically at $90,000. Well, if I was going to use this rule of thumb as part of my deal analysis to say if this was worth me moving on, I would want this house to be worth $100,000 because...
You're talking about the ARV, right?
Yes. Because if I put 10 into it and they owe 80, I want double that 10, right? My cash that went in was 10, I want to double that. And then I want to look at what it's worth versus what I'm going to owe, and I want that much in equity.
So real quick, because, sometimes even I get confused. Like, I get that they're behind 10,000.
Right.
But if the mortgage payoff is 80, if I come to the table with 80, doesn't that cover the 10?
Right, so not really. And that's one of the things why, like a second ago, I was like, well, we're just keeping it simple because this is just very simple numbers. Here's the thing. No. That's a good question, and that's probably one of the questions that would pop up because it's very applicable. This $10,000 that they're behind is made up of principal and interest, right? So each payment is going to be made up of your PITI. Right, you've got your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. That's what your mortgage payments are made up of. If you've got $10,000 in missed payments, some of that is going to be escrow, some of that is going to be interest, and then some of that is going to be principal. If you are early on in the mortgage process, let's say that you're in the first few years of having that mortgage, barely anything is touching the principal in your payment. That's how amortized loans work. It's how a car payment works. It's how a house payment works. At the beginning, all of your payment is going towards interest. Barely anything is getting touched on the principal, okay? But as time goes on, you see some of this curve here, right, where this is going to be your interest, this is going to be your principal, and it kind of starts coming up to where your payment, percentage-wise, is all interest at first, and then more and more of that principal starts kicking in.
Yeah, we're talking about that whole... that going there, that going there.
Exactly. This would be your principal, your interest. This would be your principal. This is a percentage of your payment, and this is over time. Right. Okay. So what happens is right up front, if you're looking at a house where they only got their mortgage 2 years ago, all of that $10K is being made up
they're right here.
in interest, right? So maybe $1,000, $2,000 of that is going to be actually affecting your principal balance.
That makes sense now.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if you're 15 years in, maybe $5,000 of that is going to affect your principal balance. So as a general rule of thumb, I typically say you can count about 20-ish% of whatever their arrears are, and that will generally be about what's going to come off of the principal once you catch those arrears up. Does that make sense? So like in this case, I might say, okay, well, once I pay this $10,000 in back payments, they're going to owe $78,000.
Got it.
Right?
Yeah.
And then if it's worth $100,000, well, I have a difference of $22,000 at that point in time, right? It's worth $100,000, they only owe $78,000 once I close on it, but I put 10 into it. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, but part of that deal analysis shouldn't be like calling them up and be like, hey, what is the payoff? Because we're talking about getting creative, we're talking about finding your direction of where you want to go. If the payoff is 83, and that may change something.
This is under the assumption that we have the correct numbers in front of us, right?
My bad.
So this would be assuming that we had that conversation with them. He's absolutely right. Part of deal analysis, like we were stressing so hard at the beginning, is getting the right numbers, right? And when I say getting the right numbers, that doesn't just mean ARV.
Right.
That means getting your right payoff, getting the right reinstatement amount, all that kind of stuff.
That's what I was asking before, but you slapped me down like, well, I already told you.
Well, I'm sorry.
I was softballing and you
I'm
whiffed.
sorry. Well, because at that point in time I was talking about fix and flips. We haven't got into that. So when we're looking at right numbers, we need to know exactly what we're talking about, right? We need to know what we're looking at as an actual basis and not just what they told you, because that's one of the things for those of us who are experienced in this game. And like this, go ahead and hit like right now if you've ever had a seller tell you that they owed something. They're like, oh yeah, I owe this, and it was absolutely not true. Hit me a love if you have ever had one of your sellers say, oh, it's in good shape. It really doesn't need anything. And then you go in there and it's like a $25,000 rehab budget.
And I will say this, part of the Grant Teach Me Something, part of everything we do at Propelio is we try to cater to pretty much everybody in real estate. So whether you're a super beginner or whether you're in advanced just trying to learn a new strategy, but if you are a super beginner, this is one of those things you need to take notes on. The PITI, because it gets thrown out there so many times that, if you're not careful, you're like, yeah, I know what that means. And I know it's a very simple concept if you've been in the business, but if you're new to it, just write that note down. PITI, principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Because it's one of those terms like ARV gets thrown out so many times that if you're not careful and you never raise your hand and be like, hey, what does that mean? You'll always feel like an idiot, even though you shouldn't feel like an idiot. It's just something you didn't know. So that's one of those things, if you're new, take a note, write it down, and just, it's one of those things that everybody talks about, but you may not know, but now you know.
And I would just like to apologize to everybody because I didn't see this camera over here, and so I've probably been looking like way off to the side. I thought we were working off of one of these. If we're working on that camera, I'm sorry. You're just seeing the right side of my face.
It's all good, baby.
Oh, we're good. Okay, cool. Excellent. So back to what we're talking about with that rule of having the double cash, right? If I'm putting $10,000 in of my actual cash, right? Because let me just step back and on that point of where I'm making assumptions that people understand things that you might not. When I'm talking about taking over on a mortgage subject to, there's a couple of parts of that. Yeah, we're going to put some cash up to catch the loan up, but then we don't have to put the cash up for whatever they owe. We're just going to take over on those payments. That's one of the things, that piece of leverage is what allows us to buy at higher percentages. That's what allows us to buy at lower equity amounts. And this is one of those things that we've talked about in previous Grant Teach Me Somethings, is that when you have that debt leveraged for you in a subject to loan, and a loan that does not have your name on it, that you do not have personal liability on, that allows us to buy at a little bit less of an equity position because our risk is lower. Because here's the thing, let me ask you this. Why is it that we have that 70 or 75% ARV mentality if we're a flipper?
Honestly, it's in some ways it's arbitrary, because if you go back 10 years, the number was 65%. It's an arbitrary number that you're just trying to throw out there like, okay, this is the amount of profit I want to try to make, but also the risk that I'm trying to negate.
Yeah.
So if you're a hedge fund, those guys are buying at 90, 95, 100% of whatever, because they're leveraging their risk through volume.
Right.
But if you're a one-offer, that's why you're trying to get that 50, 60, 70, 80% minus repairs. Yeah,
thank you so much for hitting it. That's exactly what I was looking for. It's based on risk. Deal analysis is all about judging your risk. He's like, yes, I got it. Always put you on the spot and see how it goes. Deal analysis is all about judging risk. Deal analysis is all about figuring out, is this risk worth your time and your money? That's what we're trying to figure out with a deal analysis. So our traditional knowledge of 70 or 75% is based upon saying, this is typically a good risk assessment. If you're in at 75%, you are typically not risking too much of your capital because of, like I said, what if you hit an issue and it eats up your profits and that kind of stuff? That is risk abatement, right? Risk abatement. And when we're doing something like this, I like to use big words.
You know the proper word. Put that in the comments.
I like to use big words. I don't know. But when we're talking about doing something like this, we're not putting that $70,000 up. We're not putting that $75,000 up.
Right.
Part of our risk assessment is saying, if I'm going to put $70,000 up, I need to be sure I'm going to get that $70,000 back at the very minimum. Right?
At the minimum, and then whatever you tack on, that's the whole point of doing the deal in the first place.
Exactly.
So
that profit is why we're in this.
Going back to your double cash rule, like I know we're getting off the rails in a different conversation, but if you put in 70, your double cash rule, I'm assuming you want to get 140.
Exactly. Right. So like, let's say that you're looking at a deal, and this is why this is only one of the rule of thumbs. There's multiple rules of thumbs. If you're looking at a deal and you've got give me a thumbs on here. If you've got a rule of thumb for yourself. I'm just pandering for likes now.
Like, please, I need likes, I need shares.
So, if you did put up $70,000 In this rule of thumb, I would say, yeah, you want to have $140,000 in equity on that deal. And let me tell you, there are a lot of people who are $70,000 behind on their mortgage. It's crazy how often that you see somebody come to you with a mortgage statement and they are $68,000 behind on a $200,000 house. It's crazy how that can happen. Now, sometimes that kills the deal, obviously, for that to go in. But that's what I'm saying here with our risk abatement. I'm just going to use that word. If it's wrong, just translate it in your mind. With our risk abatement here, we're going to say, in the equivalent of $70,000 is going to make sure, or 70% is going to make sure at the very minimum I'm making my money.
Risk tolerance?
Risk tolerance, that would work. We'll use that one, sure. On this side, if we've got twice the amount of cash that we put in, typically that means that if we needed to get rid of that house real quick because something popped up, we should be able to get rid of that house real quick and make our $10,000 back. If we've doubled that in there, right? That should be our minimum that we get, because like in this case, if they owed 78 and we could sell it for 100,
right.
When all is said and done, even if you're not using a discounted realtor, I'll throw out Mary Lou's name because she works with a bunch of people from Propelio and from Creative Cashflow.
She's so sweet.
She's so sweet, and she's very good at what she does. It's ridiculous how good she is. Mary Lou, Marilu, works for you at gmail.com. She'll give you a 1.5% listing, which will help you a lot with when you're trying to work with something like this, right?
And that's a good point, because I know from the flipping, and I know we're all about the deal analysis, but these are the numbers you need to think about. You know, going back to the original concept of know your numbers. It's not just the ARV, it's not just the rehab, it's the mortgage, it's the payoff, it's the closing costs on the backside. So if I'm paying Mary Lou at 1.5% and I'm selling this for 100, well, already I'm paying Mary Lou, so now I'm at 98.5.
Exactly.
Then if I'm selling to somebody, I'm probably paying half the closing costs.
Right. And you're going to be paying their agent 3%.
So
that's exactly where I'm going with this.
Okay,
is
sorry,
that
I didn't mean to leapfrog you.
You didn't. You're going exactly where I was headed. Is that if you're selling it for 100, right? You have to factor in those sales costs. You have to factor in your closing costs. You have to factor in the sales agent and the buyer's agent. The reason I bring up Mary Lou is that that's one way that you can negate some of those costs, is instead of paying, because typically, for those of you who are inexperienced on this side, typically when you sell a house on MLS, you're paying 6% of the sales price in commissions. 3% is going to go to the seller's rep, and 3% is going to go to the buyer's rep. But it's your job as the seller to pay that money, right? So if you can get somebody discounted like Mary Lou, where you're only paying 1.5%, well, that's saving you that 1.5%, and that really helps out in a scenario like this. So if you look at your ARV of what you could sell it for on the market, if it's 100, and you're looking at spending 6%, let's say that you're not in North Texas and you don't have a discounted realtor, and we're just going to go with the typical 6%, that's $6,000 off. Now you're only walking away with $94,000. And then you're typically going to be spending another 1% to 1.5% on closing costs of various stuff, title, that kind of stuff.
Well, let's just easy math, 93, so 1% title.
And so what you've got here is you've got your $78,000, you've got the $10,000 that you needed to get back, so your basis is $88,000, and that means that if you're selling on the open market for its ARV, you should get $93,000. That should pay off your $80,000 to the bank and give you your $10,000 back, and you'll make a couple grand in the middle there. But what this affords you is that you've got the ability to discount your property by a couple grand or do a seller's concession or something like that. But the whole point of the double cash is that because of this, even if you're having to sell it just as is, not doing owner finance, not some of these other methods, not holding it, anything like that, you can get rid of it and get your money back.
So what we're talking about right now is just on surface level, this deal is not going to kick your ass.
Right.
It's not. You're not going to lose money. You're at least going to get out what you put in.
Right.
Because obviously, the reason I put this plus here is because obviously you're going to want to try to sell more.
Sure.
There's appreciation strategies. There's maybe you hold as a rental, maybe you do owner finance. But on surface level, if forgive me, shit hits the fan, I can at least throw it on MLS and get my money back.
That is 100% exactly why I'm saying that.
Got it.
Right. You're right on the point. It's because that's not what we want to do. We don't want to buy the house and then just list it on the market and hope to make back our money. What we want to do is we want to use some of those other strategies.
And I'm glad we started with that. I'm sorry, Daniel, for cutting Grant off. But most people are always like, well, what if? Well, here's your what if.
Yeah, our whole job is to assess the what if and make sure that even if the what if happens, we make our money back. That's what risk tolerance is all about. It's what our risk assessment is all about. If crap hits the fan, are we going to at least make our money back? Because then, if anything goes right, you make money. That's what we're trying to analyze and figure out. So my first rule of thumb for if you're buying a low equity deal is going to be that double cash rule, okay?
Yeah.
And again, I say it's double cash when you close on the property. And the reason why I specify that is exactly what we went into a minute ago, and the fact that when you close on that property, whatever cash you put in to catch that loan up, it's not like hey, they owe 80, they're behind on 10, so once you put the $10,000 in, they're only going to owe 70. That's not how it works, right? It's also not like they owe 80, you put the 10 in, and they still owe 80. Some of that 10 is going to go towards their underlying lien, and I want twice as much of my cash on that new number versus its ARV. That's what I want to be looking at. So in the case like what we said here, we said 78,000. I would want 78 plus 20 to be my ARV. Okay, so that is. Oh, go ahead.
So your double cash rule is, what's the mortgage, what's the behind, and what can I sell it for?
Exactly.
So the behind is 10, and I could sell it for 100. Well, 100 minus the 80 is 20. I'm somewhat safe.
Yes, because you've doubled the cash that you're in.
And the whole strategy here is to get that money back.
Get that money. Yeah.
Get that money back. And if you're looking at this going, holy crap, Ryan is scatterbrained and he has zero legible handwriting, well, guess what? It's still better than his.
It is absolutely a trillion times better than mine.
So this is not the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario is tornado comes through and you don't have tornado insurance.
Right.
But this is on your very least, hey, you're not going to lose your ass doing real estate.
Let's not lose our assets.
Yeah. Because again, I actually was having this conversation last night. In real estate, you really need two things. You have to have that hustle, you have to have that work, and you also have to be creative.
Yep.
And I guess the third caveat would be, creative cash flow. That third caveat would be you have to have the ability to have the risk tolerance or risk abatement or whatever that risk is. Or again, help us out here in the comments. What word are we looking for?
I think risk abatement to get rid of it, risk assessment to look at it.
But anyway, you need to be able to have the work, be creative, and have that risk tolerance to just jump in both feet and do this.
Yes.
But all this we just showed, or what Grant showed, I'm just along for the ride, is to show, hey, you're not going to lose your butt.
Right. If you do things right, it's all about, this is a knowledge game. It's all about what you know and who you know and how to get things done. If you know what you're doing when you're analyzing this deal, you should at least break even, and that's what we're looking for. Because if you at least break even, that means that anything that you do right makes you money. Alfred has a good question here. Can you talk about how to protect yourself if you pay the back payments even though you're not on the loan? Okay, so that's a good question. So even though you're not on the loan, part of what we're discussing here is buying subject to, right? That's how I'm going to employ, that's the strategy I'm going to employ in buying a low equity deal. We talked about subject to on the Grant Teach Me Something episode, I think 6. So you can look at the playlist on Propelio.com or on Propelio's Facebook page. So you can go back and learn a little bit more about subject to. But when you're buying a house subject to, your name doesn't go on the mortgage loan. That is correct. Your name is not going to be on that loan. And that loan is likely going to have something that's called the due on sale clause. And that due on sale clause gives the mortgage company the ability to ask for the remainder of their loan to be due, which can kill the deal. The likelihood of that happening in the real world is extremely slim, and we talk about that more in the subject to side of things. The short answer is that you can't really do a whole heck of a lot to prevent that from happening. However, if you're in a deal like this, the likelihood of having that go wrong and having them take the house back from you and you put your money up and you're not going to get back that money can be minimized through going ahead and getting this thing income producing, right? That's for many reasons. We want to get these assets income producing as quickly as possible. So one exit might be to sell it with owner financing, to do what's called a wraparound mortgage. One exit might be to hold that as a rental, right? Mm-hmm. One exit might be even mixing some of those, holding for rental and then flipping once the appreciation came up. But either way, you've got to start making some money in it. Once that asset is making money for you, you are more likely to be able to refinance out of this mortgage with a private lender or even maybe with the bank so that you can pay off that subject to mortgage and hopefully not have to risk not making your money back from this. Does that make sense?
Yes. Can I curveball?
Please.
So, because one of the things here we're always stressing is be creative and get this. And one of the things we always talk about is I never use my own money to buy houses.
Right.
I don't want to spend 10 grand.
Right.
What do I do here? Because I know it costs 10 grand and then I know we got the debt servicing on the 80. Again, we're only talking about 10 grand here.
Yeah.
But say I'm a new investor
Right.
and I hear what you're doing and I'm smart enough to keep up, but I don't have $10,000.
Right.
So what do I do?
So here's one of those things that you would want to look at here. What I do in this case is I'm looking for people, I've got a lot of private lenders out there that might only have $50,000 in their IRA account. They might only have $70,000, but they want to use that money in real estate in their self-directed IRA. Now, with that type of money, it's a lot of money, and don't get me wrong, it's really hard because a lot of times in real estate, I'll be throwing around, I'm like, oh, $80,000, that's nothing. You know what I mean? But in perspective, it's not a lot of money. Somebody that's like that is going to be the type of person that would be your lender for this money right here. Second lien money. That is one of the tools that I use all the time in making sure that we are going to be able to catch up these payments, get the money for the repairs, but it doesn't have to be my money. I'm going to approach one of my lenders that might have $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 in their self-directed IRA and say, hey, I've got this deal. I'd like to take it down. It's going to take me $10,000 to catch up the payments and do the repairs and that kind of stuff. So you want to give me that loan. They give me the loan. I use that money. And then I have to factor in my debt servicing on that, as well as the debt servicing on this mortgage to see if this deal makes sense, which is a great segue into the next rule of thumb for running these deal analysis.
Before we go too far down
Yes.
the rabbit hole, only because I did introduce this, because I know the next question people may have is, okay, that's cool, but where do I find this? And my answer would be networking.
Yep.
Go to your meetups, go to your events, get everybody's, or you can call Corey. Meet people, see what their interests are, see what they're doing. But what is your answer to how do I find this?
It's exactly the same way. It's through networking. It's through being the guy, being the girl, being the person that knows how this stuff works and asking the questions. Too many people are so scared, especially the newer investors. If you are intimidated, or even if you can remember being intimidated, shoot, I'm gonna put a like right here. Like it if you've ever been intimidated before going to your seller meeting, going to talk to a private lender. Shoot a like on there because I want people to understand that this is you're not alone. Everybody is intimidated at the beginning when you're starting to talk to sellers, you're starting to talk to private lenders. That is an intimidating time in your life. But if you get used to...
I feel like the ESPN show where it's like, oh, I like that point. Ding, 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 ding.
But if you just get out there and you start doing it and you start having these conversations with people and you just be honest with them. Just say, look, this is what I've got. This is what I can do. And I know that you have capital that you want to deploy. This is how I talk to my private lenders. It's never, will you lend me money? It's, I can deploy capital for you, right?
And on that, just to further rabbit hole, just because I know it's a good point to make before we get into the next step of the deal analysis and the exit strategies, is if you're watching these videos and you're going to these meetups and you're reading these books, chances are you know more about real estate investing than you give your credit for.
Yeah.
I know up here I joke around and be very self-deprecating, but at the end of the day, I fully am confident that I know more than a typical seller. And that may even be the same case to your doctor buddy. They may be the smartest doctor, cardiovascular, whatever, on the planet, but I guarantee you watch 3 videos of Propelio TV here, read a couple of books, you know more about real estate investing than they do. And you need to give your credit where credit's due to yourself and just have confidence in that.
Right.
And again, I'm not trying to get all rah-rah, but at some point you need to get off the couch and actually do the work.
Right.
and stop being scared about it.
And I appreciate Alden being willing to post up and just say, yeah, that's me right now, because you're not alone. Everybody feels that way. It is intimidating. But like Ryan said, everyone has been there, but you got to do it. You just got to start getting. And let me tell you, it's pretty cool that once you get out there, it actually becomes much easier. It's actually, now it's just second nature. I can talk to anybody about anything and it's not a big deal. So that is one of the things, one of my tips for you is as you talk to your private lenders, it's not, will you please lend me money? It's, I have assets and I could deploy the capital for you if you've got capital you need deployed, right? Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a switch. Now you're helping them, they're not helping you, because in reality, that's what it is. You're helping them get their capital on the market. Because I'll tell you something right now, we have tons of cash. Everybody and their dog has cash to spend. I have lenders right now with $150 million through different lenders. I've got $150 million backing me right now, and I don't have enough properties to buy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? There is a lot of money on the market, and there's not a lot of assets. What you need to do is you need to find that money. Get that money, son. What was it that you said? Get
that money. And I love that, Henry. Yeah, hashtag rah Ryan. That's my new nickname, rah Ryan. I don't know.
Okay, so to lead into our next follow-up of when we're analyzing this deal and seeing specifically with a low equity deal how we're going to make that work, I also want to make my money back, that money that we put in. I want to make that money back.
Make that money
back within 24 months. That's what I would like to get. So out of the cash flow that I'm going to receive on that deal, whether that is a rental or a wraparound or whatever that might be, out of my cash flow, I typically am shooting for 18 months, but I'll allow it to go up to 24 months. I want to make that money back.
18 to 24 months.
So in other words,
now is this for the double cash or have we
it's
moved
a
on?
separate rule of thumb because here's the thing is that sometimes one makes sense and sometimes the other one does. So if we look at, let's say $10,000 and we wanted to make that back in the next 24 months, that would mean that you would need to have a minimum cash flow of $415 a month.
This is the 10,000?
This is off the 10,000, right? Like if you had to put $10,000 into this deal, I would want you to be making a cash flow of at least $415 a month on that deal.
Now, is this to get the 20 or just to get
That's
the 10?
Just to get the 10 back.
Okay.
So again, the reason why we have multiple rules of thumbs is that sometimes one will make sense over another. Let's say that you don't have double cash for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. But, because here's the thing, it sounds odd, but you can buy houses, and I've had this happen before. Like I've got a couple of properties in my portfolio where I literally just don't have any equity on the deal. They owe me $120,000 and I owe the bank $118,000, but I'm cash flowing like $500 a month on that deal, right? So it's weird how that works out, but it can, because that 118 might be on a loan mod that's only at 1.5% and the 120 might be at a 9.5% interest rate kind of thing. And so when you put those two together, sometimes you'll have it, you're making $500-$600 off of an asset and you've got no cash flow on it. Well, obviously you're not gonna hit your double cash on that.
So real quick, the time target, that's just to get your initial investment.
Yeah, to get your cash that you put in.
So on that previous model of the 10,000 that I put in to catch everything up to get going, and we're not talking about the debt servicing on the backside at all, we're just talking about that initial 10, your target is that 18 to 24 months for that initial...
To make that initial 10 back.
Because your strategy is, I mean, obviously we're going to go towards your bread and butter, which is the owner finance route. You probably have 28 months.
28 years, yeah.
Yeah, so 28 years just like,
Yeah, because then it's all profit past that. So you can have, the double cash could be there. You could be in with a 78 debt and a house that's worth 100, but if you're only cash flowing $50 a month, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
Because in order for you to make that $10,000 back, it's going to take 10 years, or however long that might be, to even make your money back to break zero. So that doesn't make sense. So we're going to add on that we want to make our money back, our initial investment, within 18 to 24 months. Sometimes it works together, sometimes it doesn't. Here's the thing that I want to really stress with deal analysis is that any deal is okay for you to take as long as you have a reason behind why you took it, okay? I'm going to be very clear on that because I'm going to run deals certain ways, you're going to run deals certain ways, and as long as you can tell me why you chose to take that and the risk that you're onboarding, cool, go for it. But the point is, you've got to know what that risk is. You've got to understand what you're getting into. In this case, my risk is losing $10,000. But I am choosing to move forward with it because I can make my money back within 18 months and I've got my double cash rule. Therefore, I'm cool with moving forward. I'm protected on two fronts. I'm gonna break even in a couple years. And if I need to liquidate really quickly on MLS, I'll be able to make my 10 grand back.
And to be clear, going back to this deal, this is one of those deals that I would say 90% of investors are just going to run away from because not investors are wholesaling or flipping. This clearly is not a wholesale. This clearly is not a flip. This is more of the long-term, okay, maybe owner finance. So not to throw a wrench,
Sure.
Would it make sense on the rental side?
Yes, yeah, as long as, again, at that point in time, we're looking at our cash flows, right? Same kind of thing. You can do that double cash, you can do the cash flow. If you're going to be making your money on that rental, that's great. One reason another thing that you might throw in there as a rental outlook, is if this is in a super high appreciating market.
Right.
If you know that this market is moving up, everybody's wanting to go into that area, then you might choose to hold that one as a rental instead of selling it with owner financing or doing something like that, because not only will your equity position be going up and up and up, but if you so choose, you can liquidate that in the future and actually make a nice chunk of change off of it, or whatever that might be. I think rentals are a very valid exit strategy for these types of things, but you're going to be looking at basically the same numbers here to make that decision.
And I'll throw in one more strategy, just because we were talking about in the office here, is, we always talk about get creative, expand your thought process. Don't get emotional with the houses. If you do come across a house that you can get at a good price and you have that confidence that it's going to appreciate and you don't really want to get in the rental game, guess what other strategy you have? Move in yourself. Move into that house. Too many people you've done it. Jay Lee was talking about doing the office today, or yesterday, I should say. It's, buy it, move in, and then in a couple years sell it, or a couple years rent it out. So stop thinking about your personal residence as being this, cloudy, unicorny like castle, and think of it as another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah,
is that
totally.
You want to expound on that?
Absolutely, yeah. It's again, we got to get creative about these things. There's a lot of ways to make money in this business, and you can't. It's not always just buy, fix, flip. And right now, specifically, there are so many people in that bucket. There are so many people out there trying to buy, fix, flip that we've got to know some extra little creative strategies to get by some of the competitiveness that's out there. Sometimes you hit those home runs. Sometimes you get that 75 or 70% deal, and that's great. But a lot of times we can clean up after this giant bucket of investors that are all trying to buy in a certain strategy by knowing some other ways to attack that strategy. So that's...
And real quick, I do want to let you finish your train of thought here, but when we're done, just so you don't wrap up on me, and I'm like, hey, let's get some meat, and you're like, I just spent 45 minutes. I do want to do some easy ones, and I do want to do some easy deals for wholesaling, easy deals for flipping.
Absolutely.
And I know we're getting to the nitty gritty of the difficult stuff that nobody's doing, because that's your bread and butter, but I also want to make sure that we give it to
That's a very good point.
And on that note, if you do have questions, drop them in for us. We're here for you. We're all about sharing knowledge. I got two very sweet messages yesterday, a person from San Antonio, a person from Houston. So thank you so much to you guys. But if you have questions, drop them in here. The reason we do this live and not just necessarily pre-tape it is so we can have that whole conversational aspect. A lot of the stuff that we do here with Grant is driven by your comments, your questions. So please like it, please share it. Please ask as many questions as you can. This is your opportunity to get that free mentorship, if you will, instead of spending the thousands and thousands of dollars that Grant will charge if you try to do the mentorship.
That's true. That's true.
My
time is worth something.
My time is money.
Corey here asked how many sub-2s I hold. I've gotten done with a few larger note packages. So right now, I think in my portfolio, I only have maybe 60 or 70 subject to loans. But I've made money on about 950 houses, and a lot of those houses I've made money on them 2 or 3 times, just because of how this business works. So Done a lot of owner financing, done a lot of this kind of stuff. It's, again, it's my bread and butter. It's what I enjoy doing. But I like that you're pointing out, let's take some easy ones. Let's do some softballs.
I want you to finish your thought
Well,
process
I think
first.
that's actually a pretty good stopping point because, what we're looking at, I just like to try to keep these things within time. I already warned everybody this is a multi-part type of discussion, right? So there's 2 quick rules of thumb for you if you're looking at low equity deals that you can typically use to get a really good idea of what's going on.
So let's start with I'm a wholesaler, the wholesaler's mindset.
Right.
Their brain,
Yeah, draw that one.
their mindset.
So first of all, let's just kind of define wholesaling just to make sure that everybody is on the same page, right? So, on the wholesaler side of things, I'm disappointing somebody with my portfolio. Sorry if I've made you feel like I have more in there, or if you're being sarcastic, I don't know, Lacey. Either way, haha. So the wholesaler's mindset is, hey, there is 1 million people out there with cash right now that are looking to buy houses to hold, buy houses to flip, buy houses to do whatever. All right, thank you for doing so much work for me. This is awesome. I'm going to be able to really explain some things well for you. So what the wholesaler's mindset is, they say, okay, I know that Grant said he has $150 million right now backing him ready to buy houses. I don't have $150 million right now to buy houses. So what I'm going to do as a wholesaler is I'm going to market to find those houses. And I know that Grant is willing to spend 75% of the ARV on the purchase of this property, okay? So if Grant is willing, and Grant is the buyer here, let's put investor buyer, just to clarify that. We are the investor buyer. This is me, the investor buyer. I'm willing to spend 75% on this property, and that means that if the house is worth $100,000 after it gets fixed up and it needs $20,000 worth of repairs, that means that what? What would I buy this house for? If it needs $20,000 worth of repairs.
What's the ARV?
ARV is 100.
Okay.
What would I actually pay for that house?
If it needs 25 in repairs?
We'll say 25. 25 in repairs.
Grant the investor wants to buy it at 50.
Yes. I will pay $50,000 for that house.
So ARV is 100. Repairs are 25. So 75% times 100 is 75.
Yes.
Minus the 25 equals, that's what you're buying this house for.
Right. That is my acquisition cost. It's $50,000.
So you want to spend $50,000.
So what the wholesaler sees is Grant is willing to spend $50,000 on this house. Grant will give me $50,000 for this house. The wholesaler is going to market to this house, go talk to the seller, and convince that seller to sell them the house at $40,000. So the wholesaler is going to say, look, seller, I found you. You need help. You need to sell this house. Blah, 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 blah. Sales pitch, sales pitch, sales pitch. Give me your house for $40,000. And the seller's going to be like, okay, that sounds like a good deal. So they sign a contract with the seller. And then the wholesaler is going to come find me and say, hey, Grant, I know you're willing to spend $50,000 on this house. How about you give me $10,000 and I'll give you this contract for $40,000 for this house. You're essentially selling the contract for what's called an assignment fee. You're assigning your position on that contract because there's a seller and a buyer on a contract, right? The seller, the buyer. The buyer, the wholesaler, is going to assign that position to Grant, the investor buyer, for whatever the difference is they can make. That's called an assignment fee. That's how a wholesaler makes their money.
And the reason this is so powerful is because if you can get the seller to sell you the house for $1, and I'm being exaggerative, Sure. On purpose, because if you could get it to them for $1, you could still sell it to them for $50,000.
Yes.
So this number here, that wholesale assignment fee, whatever. It's not a set fee.
Right.
There's not a percentage. There's not a rule. There's not a nothing. Because here's the thing: is if they'll sell it to you for $49,000, yeah, you're not going to make any meat on it, but you could still make $1,000.
Right.
So there is no set number there. So that's just an easy deal analysis. What I really love about the way you did it is most wholesale, well, I'm not going to say most wholesalers, but beginning wholesalers, they worry about this. They worry about this number and this number way too quickly. They're like, how much money can I make and how much can I buy it for? when they should be worried about what can I sell it for. Because if I look at a house and I know for a fact I can sell it to Grant the investor for $50,000, that means I have everything from $48,000 down as my negotiating room. Because if I'm like, hey, Susie Seller, I'll give you $1, and she's like, well, I was really hoping to get 50. Well, can we meet in the middle? Well, yeah, I'll take 25. Well, guess what? You just made 25,000.
Yeah.
So my point being is, on the deal analysis of a wholesale deal, you want to know this number first. That's why it's important to network. That's important to know what the market is. Because again, in this market, 75% might be the market number. 10 years ago, it might have been 65%.
Yeah. It changes, and you really have to know what people are buying for, and you've got to have a good network of this guy. And let me also just say, be wary if you meet somebody and all they do is brag about how big their buyer's list is. You don't need a big buyer's list. You need like 5 people that will buy every house that you put in front of them. That said, my buyer's list is 40,000 strong, so if you need a house sold, one of the strategies that you can use as a wholesaler is talk to somebody else who does have consistent buyers and JV with them and accept half of that cost there. Your job as a wholesaler is to know what you can sell it for. To know what you can sell it for, I'll tell you right now, you get blocked from my inbox if I get one email from you where your ARV is way off. You better have your numbers right, okay? Because if your ARV is way off, I don't have time to deal with you. So you want to go to something like Propelio, or if you have MLS access, looking directly in MLS access, not using the tax assessed value, not using Zillow, not using Trillia, using MLS comps.
So let me get Shakespearean. Know thy numbers. And in a wholesale deal, the numbers are the rehab, the ARV, and what is that guy going to buy it at?
Right.
It's very simple. It's that basic. And too often, new people in this business, intermediate people, like, it's so hard. It's so hard. It's so hard. It's like, nah. It's what is it worth? What does it need? What can I sell it for?
Right.
That is the whole know thy numbers.
Exactly, and they've got to be accurate. You have to be accurate. So also consulting with somebody, bringing somebody in who might be more experienced in it, might help you out on that side as well.
That being said, if you're new and you have questions about your numbers, hey, reach out to me or Daniel. Hey.
Yeah, and Richard says you may need to do another show on how to accurately comp a property. I was actually planning on doing that. That's going to be one of our upcoming deal analysis workshops, is how do you properly comp your properties, because that is a scientific art form. You really have to know what's going on with that, and it's very easy to just look and say like, oh, a house sold for $300,000 in this neighborhood, therefore I'm going to sell my house for $300,000, but every other house sold for $240,000. It's not probably a $300,000 house, right?
So this is very surface level stuff. To go one level deep, this Grant investor, the buyer, he may be a flipper, he may be a rental guy, he may be an owner finance guy. So again, I don't know why I'm yelling, but this is very surface level for mainly a flipper. A rental guy or gal, they may be at 80+%, An owner finance guy, going back to what we said, they may be at the 82%. So, again, you need to know your buyer, you need to network, you need to know, because these are all the different exit strategies you may have. Because yes, on surface level, 50, 10, 40, boom, 75% rehab. I just made $10,000 on assignment on a wholesale deal. So know what your end buyer, their target is.
Right. And then similarly on the flip, that's just removing this guy. At that point in time, you're just looking between you and the seller. Can you get your numbers beneath your risk tolerance? That's all that you need on that. Now, part of the deal analysis, and I know that Daniel has shared before a really good deal analysis like Excel sheet that you're able to use. And so I don't know, maybe he can share that one again for you guys, but it will actually go through, because this is how you acquire with deal analysis. This is what you're looking at its simplest form. But But if you want to know how much money you're going to make on that, that's a whole separate issue. Because now you have to start factoring in the things like, hey, I'm going to spend 8% on closing costs and realtor fees, and I'm going to have to hold my property for 3 months, and holding costs are going to cost this much on my debt and this much on my utilities and this much. You've got to factor all that kind of stuff in to see how much money you're actually going to make. But what we've talked about today is how to acquire, what kind of analysis you need in order to sign that contract, and then what we can talk about another day, or actually I think Daniel gave a lesson on this, is how to analyze how much you're actually going to make on that deal.
And Sean, that's a great point. Sean Burke was asked, or not asking, he was just pointing out, is like, rehab numbers are all over the place because everybody has their different material costs, everybody has your different labor costs. Exactly. Again, know thy numbers. As a wholesaler, your job is to get as close to as possible. One of the strategies a wholesaler can use is partner up with a good GC in town. Obviously, you don't want to abuse that relationship and have them go to every single property to get your rough estimates. But if you've got a contract locked up, I guarantee you give a call to like a Blake Johnson over at Finishing Touches, like, hey, can you give me a quick quote on that? And then what I'll do is when I assign this off, I'll throw your quote with it and they can choose or not choose to use you. Then you have really real numbers. And that's one way to firm up those numbers for when you assign it. But ultimately, as an end buyer, you're okay with that because, say, Grant has high estimates on fix and flips, on the rehab. But I've got my guys. Jawad, he's got his own teams. People have their own teams, and that's where you find those deals and you can be more competitive because you know your numbers, but if you can firm up those numbers and have reductions where other people's don't, that's more profit.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's a good way to look at it. So I think this is a good, clear time for us. Right now we've talked about some easy stuff on wholesaling. We've talked about some of the better ways to look at a low equity deal. Fix and flipping is right in there. One of the reasons I don't spend a whole lot of time on those things is that I think a lot of guys you're overcomplicating it, making it into something it's not. You'll notice I spent about 45 seconds at the beginning of this. Yeah, if you want to flip a house, buy it at 75%. That's as easy as that. Figure out what your ARV is, buy it under this certain percentage, and you're going to be fine. How much money you'll make off of that deal is going to differ based on your holding costs and days on market and that kind of stuff. But if you're in that 75-cent range, you're fine. Don't overcomplicate these things. We want to make it as simple as possible because simple is repeatable. Simple is scalable, okay? And that's what you want, is you need scalable processes and scalable ideas to be able to put this into play and buy multiple houses on a monthly basis and really get out there and get these things going. If your version of deal analysis is every deal that comes in front of me, I have to sit down in front of my computer and run the numbers on every single one of them just to see, just in case there's a deal that's in some diamond of the rough, you're probably going to find a diamond in the rough there, but you're probably wasting a lot of time, right? So keep it simple. Find your simple solution that's scalable for you, and that's how you continue to buy.
At the end of the day, all this whiteboarding is deal analysis, whatever, however you spell it, is all it is know thy numbers. Are you done with the whiteboard?
Yes, I'm
let's
done with the
go
whiteboard.
over here and just answer
Daniel
questions.
says there's some questions above, and I feel like we got... Oh, JV. What does JV mean? That's a really good question. Thank you for asking that. Lacey answered for us. It's a joint venture. In other words, what we're looking at is I might have a property, he might have money. So I don't have money. I'm going to say, hey, Ryan, you got a bunch of money. I got a property. How about we work this deal together? I'll give you half of whatever the profits are.
Or it could be he has a property, but maybe I don't have money, but I have access to money, which is just as good as having money in real estate.
So Jason Brown is letting everybody know that you need to be messaging him because he has money he wants to give you. That's not what he said, but that's what I'm translating it to. And
does he have a Gmail account?
And you just have to wire him $1,000, and then he'll give you.
No, we don't know that. He could be legit.
Yeah.
But you do your due diligence on that. Like if somebody ever says this, that, and the other, what I always like to tell people in real estate is just assume everybody's full of shit. That's. Somebody's phone is ringing. It's distracting.
Yeah.
Oh no. But just assume everybody is full of it. Some people are good people, some people are bad people. But if you have a little bit, and I'm not saying be a negative Nancy and always on your toes, hey, be a little smart and go, okay, is this a real thing or not?
Yeah.
You know, the reason I was kind of joking about the Gmail thing is if you go to any Facebook forums, every other comment is, I'm a lender and I've got money to spend, or I've got money, and they all have an @Gmail email account. I had $1,000 application fee and I can loan you up to $1 million. Just like, and then you give them $1,000 and the next thing you know, they're gone.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is scammy.
So I'm glad, Daniel, I did miss, Richard asked about the buy, rehab, refi, rent, or retail strategy there. And that is, it's a mixture of things. But really, again, it's overcomplicating it to think too far into it other than kind of what we talked about here. Buy at the right percentages and then you can refi out. We did discuss about like, if you've got an asset that's income producing, it's going to be more likely that you can refi out with a private lender, especially if you've got equity in that deal, then a bank might be interested in it as well. And then the rentals, you're just looking at your rental rates. And I personally want to be breaking even on the capital that I've put into a deal within 18 to 24 months. That's what my assessment looks like.
And I think ultimately we touch on both points a lot. One of the biggest points is don't have analysis paralysis where you go too deep into it. And I understand, yes, this whole segment is about analyzing, deal analysis, and making sure the numbers are right. But you can know the numbers. Once you've done it a couple times, it becomes second nature and be like, yeah, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense. Oh, that smells weird. And again, maybe you find those diamond in the rough.
I like houses that smell weird. I can get them cheaper.
You can make them money. Pee smell is money. You know, but at the end of the day, it's not that hard. You know, I always tell people, if you've got the work, you've got the determination, you can kill it in this business. It's the people that want to work, but their idea of work is 30 minutes after they get off their full-time job.
Right.
And, I put out 15 bandit signs this afternoon. It's like, well, you got someone like a hard, but it just takes work. And again, woo.
Ryan.
Ryan.
It is. It's true. You know, and I encourage everybody to stick with it. And if you are working a 9 to 5, you have to treat this like it's a second job, or it's only going to give you hobby money. If you want big money, it's another job for you.
Right.
Guys, continue hitting me with questions here. I do monitor these things. You can tag me at CCF Mentors is going to get me on the
or at Grant Kemp.
Or at Grant Kemp is going to get me on this because I want to answer things for you. Next week, tune in because I do want to run analysis of one of y'all's deals. If there's somebody out there that's willing to, or has a deal that you're working on, we'll run it live right now because it might be a great flip, it might be a great wholesale deal, it might be a low equity deal, or it might be a no-go. And it's important to see how those things work.
On that, do we have, I know we're already an hour in, but I've got a deal that came in yesterday.
So you're just going to take our show from next week and add that on?
Yeah, but by next week it's a done deal. You know, let me see if it works. Do you mind running it, or is that too soon?
Sure, Ryan. Let's do what Ryan wants to do.
Well.
What's up? You got it?
Okay. Mortgage is up to date.
Okay.
It's 168. Mm-hmm. There is an HOA lien of basically $13,000.
Okay.
The payments is $1,500.
Are we doing this? We're going to run a deal?
I don't know. Do you want to?
I mean, okay.
You're like, damn it.
I mean, yeah, sure.
Might as well.
Okay. We've been going an hour.
You know what?
All right, let's do this. What is it? We got an ARV of what, 168?
No, that's the mortgage.
Mortgage of 168. And now, guys, guess what? You don't have to tune in next week because we're already doing it now.
I think ARV is about 315.
Okay, ARV is 315.
Rehab is unknown. So let's say 20 in cosmetic.
Okay. And what was that lien?
The HOA lien is about 13,000.
Okay.
But I'm just talking about at a surface level.
Sure.
Does this make sense?
Well, all right. So what we have to look at is we've got 315 here. What is your risk tolerance? What is your number that you'll buy under, percentage-wise for a flip?
Me, 75% minus risk.
Okay. So what's 75% of 315?
315 times 0.75. 236.
So let's do another number or another color here. Is this one better? This green one. All right.
And again,
so what is
I
it?
already know the
236?
answer to this, but I just want to throw up just because I like
really
to annoy. I like to annoy Grant. 236.25. Let's just say 236.
Same.
Who's this guy?
Is that one better?
I love
Okay.
this guy. That's my fave. Jeez. And viewership has dropped to 0.
235, you said?
Sure.
Okay, so 235 is 75% of this 315.
Right. 20 in rehab.
Okay. So we're saying we need 20 in rehab and
Sure.
they owe 168. So
Yes,
that would
sir.
be a 188 deal there. And then you've got to add 198, 201 with the liens. So you're under your flip. You're at 201 here. So you have the ability to wholesale, flip, owner finance, do whatever you want. Now, do you have anything that throws a wrench in this? Because a lot of times that will, it's like, oh yeah, but they also have blanked. Is there anything else that's in that, or are these all our numbers here?
Well, let's just assume these are the numbers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So the thing is though, like, so we're at 201, well, ish, minus the rehab, minus the lien. They only owe 168. Now it's just a matter of what do they want on top of what they owe.
Right.
So if they're like, if I can walk away with 10, that's at, now you're at 178, and you know the flipper guy will buy it at 200. Well, guess what? That's still a $20,000 assignment.
And here's one way to look at it, because if we're looking at this deal right now as it stands, right, and you haven't gone and negotiated yet, we just know what they owe, we know all of that kind of stuff. We know that our, with what the base is right here is 201. Now, what the difference between 235 and 201, that's $34,000. Mm-hmm. That $34,000 is what we call our MAO. It's a form of our MAO. It's our maximum allowable offer to the seller. Maximum allowable offer. So our MAO would be 235, right? Because you said 75% is your number. That would be that 235. If they owe
that's the before rehab and lien.
no, that's with the rehab and lien.
Is it?
168 plus 20 is 188 plus 13 is. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you talking? Yeah, 350. This 235 was just 75% of the ARV.
Yeah.
Right. So
minus the 20, minus the 13.
So I'm adding up all of our debts.
203 is the true
Okay.
true 75% minus repairs.
203 is the 75. You're derailing our thought process here.
My bad.
203 is 75% minus repairs.
203 is 75% minus repairs minus the lien.
Okay.
So that's what it would be.
Okay.
I'll just go.
Do you want to run it?
I do.
All right. Show
Because
us. Run it for us. Run it for us, Ryan. Ryan, teach me something.
The reason I want to run it is because what if this guy wants 50 to walk away?
Right.
And now we're at 208 when I already know the flipper guy wants to buy it at 203. So if I'm looking at this at a sub 2, how would that work?
Right.
I was trying to tee you up.
Well, but you're giving me different numbers. I don't understand. So yes, I'm sorry. I'll get to my peaceful spot here. If we're going to run this analysis, we need to know what our percentage of the ARV is that everybody wants to be at, right? Now, as a wholesale buyer, as somebody that's buying from wholesalers, they're typically being sold out at 85% right now in DFW. That's kind of the going rate that somebody would buy it from you wholesale, right? So if we're looking at this deal on that side, 315 times 0.85 would be 267, right? That's 267 is 85% of our ARV. From that number, we would have to back out all the debt.
Right.
And then we're left with what we have to play with at that point. That would be our negotiation spot. So just to take that, so let's say that your end goal was to negotiate this so that you could wholesale it, and you were hoping to wholesale it out for 267 to somebody. Well, first thing you're going to have to do is back out that 20, because that's the rehab. Then you've got to back out the 13 because that's the HOA lien. Then you've got to back out the 168 because that is what's owed to the bank. So 267 minus 20 minus 13 minus 168, you're left with $66,000 here, right?
Okay.
That's a potential profit, like you were talking about earlier. If you were to get them to just sell it to you for what they owed only,
That would be a home run.
that would be a home run. You could make up to $66,000. So in other words, if you were looking to wholesale this deal, you could give this seller up to $66,000 on top of what they owed to buy the house. And you would still be within your numbers on that. So that might be one way to look at it. We're backing out we're finding what, because remember, like you said, we're going to start with what we could sell it for.
Right.
That 85%. And we got to back out all the expenses, and then we're left with what we could possibly use to play with.
And I know you're annoyed with me because you're like, I want to do this next week. But the reason I want to do this is real quick, just to preview what we will go into super detailed next week. But ultimately, very surface level, obviously this is a deal from a wholesale standpoint, from a flipping standpoint, but surface level, if a sub two is kind of like that 1, 2, if this doesn't work, then go here.
Not necessarily though, because...
Well, that's why I wanted to get into it.
Yeah, so here's the thing is that if they owe 168 and you can convince them to let you take over on that 168 mortgage, do it. That's $170,000 of debt that you don't have to get your name on with a private lender.
Right.
Right? So if you can take over on that, and then what would you need? You would need $20,000 to do the rehab, and you need $13,000 to pay off their lien. You only need a $33,000 second lien from somebody.
Right.
To make it worth $315,000. That's killer in the owner financing game, because now you're at 168 plus 20 plus 13. That's your basis, which I think was 201 or something like that earlier, on a house that's worth $315,000. You're killing it.
So the point of all this, and we'll end this segment really quick, is if this is your deal, wink, 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 you need to be in their front yard right now inking this up.
Yeah, if somebody watching texted this to Ryan?
Yeah.
Okay, go. What are you watching this? Stop.
Yeah. Yeah, you need to be inking this up.
Yeah, I thought this was a deal that was done. No.
That's why I wanted to put it up there, because I had a conversation last night, and that's why I'm saying I don't know the rehab, but I know. Yeah. And tax rolls. This person bought their house for $178. So since they bought it and to now, it has appreciated, $150,000. So if they're unaware of what it's worth, if they're willing to take what they paid for, maybe walk away with $10,000. Okay.
Well, and so yes, they can. That's definitely. I personally feel it is important when you're in front of your sellers to let them know what you're doing with the property, and I've always let my sellers know exactly how much money I'm going to make on it. I say exactly. I give them a range. I'm going
to make $1 million.
What I'll tell them is what I can sell it for, and then I'll tell them how hard it would be for them to do that.
Right.
And then they sell it to me, and I make my money, and they're happy about it. They're like, "No, Grant, you need to make money. I get it. That's totally cool." They appreciate that.
But before we wrap up, I don't like the implication that I'm the asshole here. Do you always put that out there, or is it only when they ask?
I will typically...
Like if they're like, hey, on this house, I want $185. Are you like, okay.
Yeah.
Or are you like, well, I can give you $185, but by the way, I'm going to make $300,000.
Yeah, that's a good question. If they give me a number and it's well within my range, I'll just give them that number. At the end of the day, everybody's going to be happy with it, right? But if I'm having to convince somebody to come down on their price, that's when I'm telling them what it's going to be sold for and all that kind of good stuff.
Right.
So let me check and see if we've got any kind of questions. I don't believe so. Here's the thing. We do this every week. We're always here every Wednesday at 11. I like to really go into a lot of the details, as you guys have seen. I think it's important to give the investors out there, to give the community actual real information, and that's a motto that Propelio holds, and that's a motto that I hold, and that's why I'm here for free every week teaching you guys how to do that stuff, and that's why they've put freaking $500,000 into a studio to put this stuff out there for you, is because it is important. That said, these guys have a great service. Propelio.com is an amazing piece of software for you that I do wholeheartedly agree with. I'm not making any kind of money from saying that, I promise you. But do check it out. There's links on the Propelio Facebook page. You get those comps, you get a CRM, you get leads that are actually good leads. So follow through with it. Give them a reason to keep giving this information out for free, because at the end of the day, for a price of a cup of coffee, at the end of the day, that's what keeps this whole thing turning. That's what allows us to be able to do this. And to that point, and we don't like going salesy, but we've got to understand this is a business for everybody. I also do mentoring. I do the educational thing, CreativeCashFlow.com. My price is changing this weekend. So if you've been considering getting on board with the Academy, we will no longer be doing the lifetime membership as it stands right now. So right now it's a lifetime membership, $485. You can sign up. You get all the classes online, everything. Whenever I'm referencing videos, we do a weekly live Q&A with all the members on Monday nights. You can get in now. After this weekend, it's going to be a monthly charge. And so if you've been considering that, get in now. Last thing, we're going to be in San Antonio this month, February 26th, February 27th. So if you are in the area, Ryan has put together a great setup, and they freaking grill the speakers and make sure that everybody is going to be giving real information, not being pitchy, that kind of stuff. So come check it out. Come check out. Where is it?
It's at the Carver Community Ultra Center. We'll drop a link into the event if you haven't registered already. But on the 27th...
The 27th, I will be following up and doing like a deep dive into more of the owner financing, more of what the creative structurings can be. And we're going to be doing that at the Plaza downtown. So I'll have an Eventbrite thing for you available on that as well. I'll be providing dinner for everybody that comes in there. It's going to be from 6 to 10 on the 27th, and we'll get deeper into this kind of stuff.
And real quick, not to get too pluggy, but if you reach out to me and you're like, hey, mentorship, I personally do not do mentorship. Daniel personally does not do mentorship. If you want to JV on deals and you want to, throw some deals together, absolutely all day long. If you're looking for somebody to hold your hand, I'll just go ahead and tell you what I normally do is I do an email introduction to Grant, and he's my go-to mentor plug. Real quick, I would like to. I want to apologize if I seem scatterbrained on this episode, or if I pushed you to directions you're like, what the hell, dude? Anyway, it's, when you do this live, it does take a mental preparation. And for the 20 minutes leading up to going on live, you saw the tail end if you watched it. I was trying to buy a house.
Yeah.
So, like, hey, I'm trying to get a contract on a house. Well, no, I've already got the verbal. We're trying to close on it today. So I apologize if I was not my normal.
It was great. We are all go. We love you. I love you. You love me. We're a happy family.
So, hey, lastly, share, get involved. We have it's so weird to say that now we have a back catalog of videos. So this is episode 11 of just the Grant Teach Me Something, but we've got a ton of other videos. If this is your first time watching us, check out the videos. Go through and just start watching them. There's tons of nuggets, tons of knowledge. And like Jawad was saying before, this video may not make sense, but if you watch the other videos leading up to it, I'm not going to say they're in order, but they do build upon each other.
Yeah.
So again, share. See you tomorrow. See you next time.
Absolutely.
Grant, as always, Grant, teach me something.
Thanks for being here, guys.
Anything last?
Nope. I
Cool.
appreciate you being here.
We are out, and we'll see you next time.